Thanks for staying with us. Informal settlement residents are living in bleak conditions. The Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa has released a report on 3 settlements in Gauteng, the Western Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. It shows the harsh realities of poor households. Researcher Tiffany Ibrahim says informality is completely ignored in South Africa. She says people from the settlements would like to work with municipalities to improve access to services. She was speaking on Newsnight with Informal.
So across all 3 sites, these are settlements that range from being home to about 13,000 people to 60,000 people. And all of these informal settlements have resisted an eviction. And so that was the first thing that had been overcome. But the 2 findings that were prominent to them post-resistance of an eviction was how insecure their tenure continues to be and how that affects their livelihood strategies. And by the lack of basic services available, that then in turn has effect on their economic opportunities for themselves and their quality of life generally. And so a major priority for informal settlement residents was not, we want a top structure house. It is, we would like to work with municipalities to improve our access to services and to secure our place on this land. So even if we need to invest in our property with our own money, we know that whatever investment we make, it will be of long-term value to us.
One would imagine that, those issues would be common, to like all informal settlements. Or perhaps a different way, maybe I should ask this question is, was it their sense that after having resisted or put up resistance, there was a clampdown, or they were treated a lot more harshly than was the case before, the authorities made an effort to get them out of their respective areas?
So there's an ironic play on what you're saying, and it's one, informality is either completely ignored in South Africa and treated as invisible, and so people do not feel recognized or even noticed, and so they're not treated like human beings and given proper access to services as the Constitution places the obligation on the state to do so. The other thing is when they are noticed, they're completely criminalized, and so people who are looking for a home to stay so they can be close to a work opportunity and contribute to this country's economy are treated as criminals. And what the missing link is that informal settlements are very much a response to inadequate housing programs that are not provided at scale that is needed in this country, and in a context where the private market is just not the answer. Nobody within an informal settlement can simply afford purchasing a house that is offered within the private market. And so in the absence of those 2 things, informal settlements exist, have been in existence in South Africa for a very long time, and are here to stay. And so municipalities and governments really need to think about, if you are going to provide housing opportunities, why not work with what is there? What is there is a group of people who have individually and collectively organized themselves to stay at a place that they believe is of best of their opportunity. And instead of eradicating them from that place, breaking their social networks, demolishing their homes, and further displacing them from cities, the way that apartheid did, why not allow people to choose where they are and build from that point and improve their livelihoods and their living conditions from that point?
No, what I was trying to understand, in case I didn't make myself clear, was whether the residents of these particular municipalities felt that they were treated badly, right, compared to other residents of informal settlements, precisely because they had put up some resistance. In other words, they refused to leave, and so the authorities weren't happy with the fact that they were militant and resisted their efforts to move them away.
So most definitely. But what we found across all 3 sites, in Durban, Cape Town, and the Northwest, is that there were multiple attempts at residents trying to engage government officials on a one-on-one basis, approaching their offices, asking for spaces to have a conversation, and being denied that access. At times, protest was resorted to, But ultimately, the thing that resisted their eviction was the use of the courts. And so the Socio-Economic Rights Institute had acted on each of these settlements' behalf within the courts to resist an eviction. So yes, they were treated badly, but that didn't mean that it turned into turmoil. It just meant that communities needed to come back and re-strategize how they were going to communicate their message that just wasn't being heard.
No, I mean, you have all these tiers or spheres of government, local government, provincial government, national government. Often one sphere doesn't really speak to the other, or the cooperation is really far from ideal. Now, as the institute that has been really doing a lot of work in this area, what for you is the point at which these people where is the best place or point where these people can actually interface with government? And from then on, what should happen ideally?
Right. So for the people themselves, they feel that ward councillors are the most accessible level of government, of local government. And working with local government is just key. And policy around upgrading of informal settlements very much encourages the interface between municipalities and communities. But there also needs to be support, as you've pointed out, from provincial and national. And what we see playing out is local and national have the same vision and are thinking the same way around funding and around working with communities, but the provincial layer is often blocking what can happen because they have
deliberately or because they're just incompetent?
They have a more top structure approach, very much focused on megacities, on RDP housing, on greenfield developments, which are all not working with what informal settlements are, where they are located. Whereas local government and national government tend to see the value of working with informal settlements and upgrading them in situ. But an additional layer of complexity is that it's required that municipalities work across departments. And so you also need interdepartmental collaboration because services is sanitation, water, electricity, and there is just no way that a single department can do that. And so not only is it hierarchical, but it's also lateral in terms of who the different stakeholders need to be. And so that leads me to my recommendation, is that communities themselves are very organized and have committee structures that represent the larger constituency of their settlements. And what we've seen in our more successful cases towards upgrading is that multi-stakeholder forums are being formed, where the community representatives are a stakeholder, local government is a stakeholder, provincial government, national government, practitioners, planners, architects, and other interested stakeholders that all have a role to play in a holistic and programmatic approach to developing an informal settlement, need to come together, need to create passages for communication, need to create and design a program, need to then allow that to be taken back to communities and allow for their participation and their input in the decision-making processes. And so there are a lot of steps and methods that need to be outlined, but essentially what you need to do is to create a team of people with different expertise that can equally contribute to a process and allow that forum to be not only a space of negotiation, but also a very clear line of accountability and responsibility to make sure that things are happening within certain timeframes, but they're also happening with the full knowledge and the backing of the residents that you're seeking to assist.
Your recommendations seem to make sense. Very briefly, why do you think the government is either not listening or?
Difficult one. I think that getting all of these pieces together is complicated. I think it complicates things often between an official, a politician, and the kinds of administration changes and the shuffling.
Takes the government out of its comfort zone.
Definitely. And it's taking government out of their offices and saying, start in the informal settlement, at the public meeting, with the residents. And so it takes time, it takes patience, it takes vision, and it takes the confidence to put something out there and allow it to be debated and pulled apart and then re-put back together. And I think often government comes from a place of imposing a control, imposing an order, imposing a formality, and not really recognizing that within an informal context, there are very organized systems that are at play. There are very formalized systems that are working for them, but just not recognizable to the outside eye because people often want to view informality as moving backwards, instead of recognizing that there are really things that are working for people within that space and that ecosystem, and trying to creatively build on that and layer that.